This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome Amitai Sasson from both Overstock Art as well as CommunicatorBase. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's awesome to have you along for the ride today. We were just talking about how you're based in Israel, near Haifa, and I was saying that I think I've had probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 Israelis on my podcast over the last 350 episodes or so. There is something in the water in Israel around e-commerce and the tech ecosystem. It's pretty phenomenal. For such a relatively speaking small population, the amount of high-tech stuff that comes out of Israel is pretty insane.
Yeah. And the high-tech scene here is very buzzing all the time. In e-commerce, I think it's very natural for Israelis because we love to sell stuff and we love technology. And so that mixture, I can see why there's a lot of e-commerce tech companies here.
It's a match made in heaven. It's like peanut butter and chocolate, right? They go hand in hand. So no, this is exciting. And look, what I love about what you are doing and what you are building there is the fact that you're scratching an itch, right? We were talking about the fact you've been in this e-commerce business of Overstock Art, and I'll let you tell me a little bit about that business, but you've been doing that for 22 years. You needed to build some technology internally to manage your supply chain. And then you developed CommunicatorBase as a SaaS platform, as I understand it. All transparency, I've never worked with CommunicatorBase before, but you basically were scratching an itch inside the business. And then you basically pulled an Amazon, right? You're like, let's turn a cost center into a profit center and let's spin this technology out. Let's commercialize this. Let's monetize this. And then let's sell it to other brands who are maybe facing the exact same supply chain challenges we're facing in Overstock Art. So why don't you tell me about that evolution, that journey, because you have worked in the tech sector before, but you also have this eclectic background where, if I go back far enough, you were also a pro volleyball athlete as well. So man, what a wild background.
Yeah, we'll get the volleyball maybe later, but for me, Overstock Art, that's my baby. It's something that we started a while back ago. And I came into the business with my brother, David. I was wearing the tech hat. So I'm everything that has to do from customer facing side, but also everything that has to do with production and with fulfillment. And we do everything in-house. We don't have a 3PL or anything like that. We have a lot of internal processes. And if e-commerce, we don't have the luxury of doing some things good. We need to do everything very good. Else, either if it's marketing side, if it is our fulfillment side and our production side, everything needs to click because customers, they'll let you immediately if something isn't the way they want it or they like it. So as from the technology side, I had the privilege of working on every processes in the business. And one of these processes that was extremely important for us was the supply chain process. For us, one of our kind of things that sets us apart is the ability that we hold all of our art in Wichita, Kansas. That's where the company's at. And so we have everything in stock. So what's on the site, and we can get into image management and things like that. We'll put that aside, but everything on the site, that's our stock that's waiting to be framed, stretched, framed, and being shipped out to your door. So that whole thing that we need to hold stock put a lot of pressure on us from a cash perspective, because all of a sudden, and this is a known fact that in U.S. retail, 60% of the retailers, 60% of their cash is held in inventory. And in order for us to be profitable, we had to reduce cash and inventory. So reduce inventory, but keep the availability high. So when the stars align, the customer will be able to buy and they'll have it in stock and we'll be able to ship it out the door. So we have a ton of processes as someone who's doing all of the production, because it's not just a pick and pack operation. We actually have saws and underpinners and stretching machines and things like that So we have a production line that we had to really keep optimizing and all that. But then we had buyers that were doing all the buying. They need to make buying decisions and email going out with Excel sheets back and forth with studios. And so we had to say, okay, this is not working out. We're seeing not only is that we're seeing high inventory, but we're seeing all of a sudden these silos of inventory that get created. So we working with theory of constraint is I'm a big lover of that management philosophy. So we really honed on that constraint, and we built a model that so each and every SKU of ours, we built a model that we can predict demand based on the production time, based on seasonality, based on past probability. We're able to forecast with a certain degree of confidence how many items we need in stock to keep it just right. Not too many and not too small. So just right. Yeah.
And so you said you used a Bayesian sort of algorithm there, and that you obviously had to look back across the historical data, and you had to say, okay, this is what supplier performance looks like with these individual suppliers. This is what shipping time typically looks like with these individual suppliers. This is what the demand typically looks like across our SKU set. This is what the supply chain time to get it from us to the customer looks like. We're trying to manage kind of multiple inputs across this predictive analysis, right? Because we're really trying to do demand planning. That's really what we're trying to achieve here. And many ERPs will have a demand planning module, the NetSuites, the D365s, et cetera, or you can buy standalone third-party demand planning software, but they all use some sort of an algorithm to take into account as many data points as they can when they're trying to not only predict demand, but they're trying to say, okay, we need to have a rough idea of what demand is going to be, but then how on the backside of that do we meet that demand? And that usually comes down to the individual SKU level. It's got to come down to the individual SKU level. And so is this something that you said, look, and I'd love to ask you, what ERP do you use? What other back office systems do you use that told you, hey, that's great. We've got these, maybe we got a WMS, maybe we got these carousel technologies, maybe we got whatever we got in the warehouse. And that's all fine and good from an efficiency perspective. We do this light manufacturing. So we take this printed piece of art, we stretch it, we create the frame, we do the whole thing. So we do light manufacturing. So we have an additive process, a value add process that we add to this art. And then presumably before it's stretched, it can take up less space in the warehouse, right? It can be rolled up, it can be in tubes or whatever it is that it's in for shipping purposes, et cetera, so that we can manage our warehouse space efficiently. So we've brought efficiency, hopefully, to everything else in our warehouse and fulfillment operations, but we still have to deal with this concept of demand, right? And so clearly at some point you said, that's great, we got all these other things, but we don't have the demand side nailed yet.
Yeah. So a little bit about our stack, just to give you an idea. So we use, for our accounting, we're using QuickBooks, and everything from the way the system's built, all of the demand side is coming from billing. So we did not, Overstock Art is our channel 0, but we also have 20 different retailers, partner retailers that we work with, like Macy's, Kohl's, Nordstrom, and all those. So when you buy from them, you're actually buying from us. They're shared retailers, bro. We're dropshipping for them.
Dropship supplier for them.
We're a dropship supplier for them. So we have all this going into QuickBooks with from the fulfillment line and going into our accounting. And then from our accounting, we know the current inventory that we have, we know the sales that we have, and every day we push this data, and then you start seeing a model of how many sales per day per SKU and the inventory fluctuation. So we push this into the CommunicatorBase. And then on the other side, the vendors, they also have access in the Communicator. So there, we don't need to send emails or Excel sheets to back and forth. Everybody's looking at the same thing. And then we go in once a week, we do orders with our vendors. And in 10 minutes, the system is telling us, and it's all color coded, and we're saying, okay, you need this and this from this vendor, bam. And we just create. So instead of having a buyer, we don't have a buyer anymore. It's just a 10-minute job for someone in the organization. And we're accurate. We're very accurate. And this is an add-on that's in addition to your ERP. So it's not an inventory management. It's not supposed to replace that. That's just a communication tool, a bridge between you and your vendors, getting data from your billing. And that's all. So that's why it's pretty neat. And the need is there because you ask even large retailers up to $200 million retailers, you're seeing them working tirelessly on these Excel sheets, going back and forth with their vendors. Because yeah, NetSuite's going to tell you how much you need to order, or Oracle is going to tell you based on certain inventory levels or things like that you need to order. But then you need to communicate this out to the customer, and things change, and then the Excel changes, and everybody's going back and forth on these. So we really eliminated all that, and we created something that everybody is a win, because the vendors love it because they're getting orders and it's clear to them, and the price isn't clear. And we put on negotiations on top and image management on top, and things like that. But it's geared towards e-commerce, and yeah, that's why
That's why you exist.
yeah.
And what e-commerce platform do you run? Because Built With doesn't tell me much. You used to run different technology for the e-commerce. You were Yahoo stores, and then you were running a few different other technologies over the years. What e-commerce platform do you run today, or is it all bespoke, built in-house?
Yes, you're right. We were a Yahoo store a long time ago. We started as a Yahoo store. That's back in the day, working on RTML. It was amazing. Things have really come a long way. But yeah, we took an open cart, which is very lean PHP, MySQL,
Self-hosted shopping cart platform.
yeah, and we completely customized it. We love the fact that it was lean and that we can do a lot of different things on it and connect it. And one of the things that, coming from a hosted solution, we didn't want to go to another hosted solution because we know that there is like the pitfalls of that, and the extra costs that are involved in that. So yeah, so we completely customized our e-commerce store, which makes things difficult to introduce new things. Everything is a project, but it gives us the control that we need. We needed, for instance, to create frames that would be built on top of paintings. So we wanted to create that, and we want customers to be able to choose a painting, but what size that they want. They can just choose the custom size that they want. So we wanted to give them pricing on the fly based on our costs and things like that. So everything is automated, and we see that when you automate things, not only is it less work on the back end side, but it also improves conversions. So these kinds of things, which is counterintuitive, you think that you'll let customers, hey, I'll put in a form and then we'll get back with you and you'll get the personal touch. Customers want a price now and they want to buy. They don't want the back and forth. So we really try to streamline all of these processes. And that's why we opted to go with a custom creation and dealing with all the back end things like that. Our stack is, we have a dedicated server, so we have system admins, and we have developers, and we have designers, but all of being managed through Upwork. So everybody is, and I love that. I think it gives you great talent and great way to manage a lot of different skill sets.
And when you classify your software that you've now built to scratch this itch, this CommunicatorBase, particularly in the Shopify ecosystem, there's an app called Inventory Planner and Forecasting, which is a very popular app. They've been acquired by Sage. That's been integrated into Bright Pearl, which is now also owned by Sage. So look, inventory planning, forecasting, demand planning, very big part of the industry. It's a known challenge. It's a known problem. There's also another app called Cogsy. It's a standalone app for Shopify brands that plugs into Shopify brands, and they build themselves as that sort of total inventory control, streamlining, generates the purchase orders, simplifies inventory management, demand planning, etc., cost management, etc. Obviously, spreadsheet free, similar to what your platform does. So if you were to compare your solution to some of these quote unquote more off the shelf solutions that plug into the Shopifys, the BigCommerces, the Magentos of the world, what do you think really starts to set your platform apart from some of these other, maybe smaller scale, depending on how you view it, maybe some of these smaller scale platforms? And also, that's at one end of the scale. You got the really small end of the scale, which is these kind of plug and play apps for Shopify. And at the upper end of the scale, you've got these really high end, very expensive ERP price tag like demand planning platforms, which take into account things like weather and multiple inventory locations and multi-channel inventory management and demand and momentum management by channel, by location, etc. So we've got at the high end, we've got these super complex demand planning platforms. And then at the small end, we got these little lightweight plugins. And then it feels like you fit somewhere in the middle of those two extremes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a known problem. And I think the big boys, yeah, they have the tools there that are connecting to SAP and those and E2 opens of the world. For us, it's, I think, like you said, we're in the middle. And I think what's unique about us is that we give that connection with the vendors and we connect to your billing. We don't look at the e-commerce as this is just one channel. And I think that kind of separates us from all the different widgets that help out in the purchasing decision. But it's one of the challenges that we have as a SaaS model is to make the initial getting up and starting to work with the system, making it as simple as possible. The way we do it is we ask you for your order. Give me an order form that you have. Give me that order. And so I'm not changing the way you work. This is your order. Let's start pushing it into the communicator base. We start that, we do that connection. We start, okay, this is the order that you communicated with them. Here are all the orders. We're pushing it in. We're starting to, and then we build out all the inventory in there. We're starting to build out the inventory. We're creating the orders. We're getting the vendors in. And then you start the connection with them, with the vendors, and then you create the order on the system. And that's it. You're hooked. You know, that it's very sticky and you just keep on going.
And presumably you then have to also connect to any inventory management system that they may have that sits outside of CommunicatorBase to push in the initial inventory levels, or I guess you can upload via CSV. And then CommunicatorBase will generate the PO, email it off or send it off via EDI or whatever it is to the supplier. How do you deal with scenarios where a merchant might have 2, 3, 4, 5 warehouses? Maybe they've got multiple inventory levels across multiple locations. Maybe they've got an owned warehouse. Maybe they have 2 or 3 3PLs that also have inventory. Maybe they are doing some element of drop shipping from suppliers. So now you need to track inventory on the supplier side, look what their availability is as a location. How do you start dealing with these because this is becoming really common in the e-commerce space, particularly in the B2B e-commerce space. This hybrid model where I'm going to run an asset light model, maybe I will hold in inventory 20% of my catalog, but then I've got the other 80% split between suppliers who will drop ship on my behalf and maybe some 3PLs that will hold inventory on my behalf. And we've got these really complex hybrid supply chain models, right? And endless aisles where some retailers are going to want to create a marketplace, right? Where they're just a supplier on their own marketplace, right? As a 1PL inventory owner. And then they'll have 3PL suppliers, third-party suppliers that are selling in a third-party way through them, almost like a Amazon type marketplace. So we've got lots of complex business models out there now, which are becoming the norm, which means that inventory locations and inventory management has gotten exponentially more complex. And so how do you deal with those kind of environments, those hybrid business environments?
Yeah. So I guess, first of all, just to back up, we take 2 sets of data. We take the sales data from the billing and inventory from whichever inventory system that you use. It could be just the SKU, how many I have in stock. That's all that either CSV upload that you do or automated
integration with your ERP, and you use an integration middleware platform to get that feed out.
Exactly. A lot of people use QuickBooks for that as well. They put just both of these data points smack into the system. I believe in a one inventory space. So
1P.
Yeah, 1P. So like inventory management afterwards into the different stores, that's from the inventory itself. Because like you said, things get very hairy and get very complex and everybody thinks they're a snow. Everybody, it's a very unique business and that's why you got to make something that's going to be flexible at one side, but also simple. And that is definitely a challenge for us when we get to an organization. We need it takes time and get from a culture perspective to get people to work with this. And I think that's the biggest challenge, to change how you're working and get on board. And that's why we get into the facilities. We like to be there spend some time and for a week, go there, listen to the people, what are their pain points. And we also have the flexibility in the system to do some of these changes. An apparel company is different than an art company. The way they're buying for seasons and things like that. So you need to adjust all these things like this. So you have to keep some degree of flexibility. And so that's why we're not in the Shopify app price tag. And we're not in the large SAP and enterprise level ones. Exactly. We're in the small to medium sized businesses where the businesses are usually larger than 20 million. And
but smaller than say 100 million, for example. So that maybe that's your sweet spot.
That's our IC, that where we're that's pretty much our bread and butter right now these days.
And so would you, let's say they've got 5 warehouses, would you just take an aggregated inventory number per SKU across those 5 warehouses, and then they would manage the distribution of that inventory from there? You would say, okay, we need to order 100 units, but how you distribute that when it gets shipped out from the supplier, how that gets distributed across your 5 warehouses is up to you. We're not going to do that. Is that something that you want to add, is to be able to do demand planning on a location specific basis instead of letting them manage how that gets, because obviously the demand for a specific location, particularly as it relates to a bucket of destination addresses, because usually there's an order management module in there somewhere that does order orchestration, order management. It's where it routes the orders to the correct destination warehouse that then it can ship it out to the end customer of the product. And so it feels like there's an opportunity for you to bring some enhanced intelligence to those individual locations and how much inventory each location should hold based on how much you're shipping out from that location. Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you. And now back to your listening.
Yeah. I think it's definitely something that we can hit on. That's where your inventory management and the way you're going to spread out the inventory goes into play. We working with retailers that have physical locations, that have online. The way the central distribution model, I think, is the right way to go. You need to keep things simple, and you need to allocate your stock. But here, I think is with the way these systems work, with the way these retailers are, they need to use tech to connect with their culture and ability to forecast demand, and then what store that needs to go to. We can tell them where the sales are, and they know where they are. We can tell them where they need to put the inventory as far as bin and location. We can tell them that, but the inventory needs to have one number to keep it simple from a data perspective and everything. Else it just gets too big of a mess. And you need to remember that you have your central place where you have the big dogs sitting and they're making the decision. Then you have in the branches there, it's going to be very hard to get them on board to speak the language and use this system the way that you have your buyer and your inventory guy and the people that are in the central location see it. So that's why we're focusing on a central one place distribution. But yeah, it's definitely something that we're constantly changing and hoping to give that solution as well.
And where are the vast majority of your customers located? And what is your core target market? Is it Israeli brands? Is it American brands? Is it Europe? Where is your target market for this technology? And you say you like to go on site, which typically, obviously if you're implementing a WMS or an ERP or whatever it is, then typically the partner of the vendor will come on site and they'll do deep dive discovery, they'll do solutioning, they'll do the configuration, they'll do all that sort of stuff. And they'll even do the warehouse configuration side of things. And I've been part of WMS implementation, so I know how this goes. But obviously, if you're based in Israel and your target market, say for example, is the United States, then you need boots on the ground to be able to go and meet with those retailers on site, be able to see what their warehouse, how it's managed, how their workflows, how their order management works, etc. You need to understand all that stuff at a fairly nuanced level to be able to implement and configure your system appropriately for their needs. So what's your primary target market, and how do you get into these opportunities? Like how do you even get a hold of these potential merchants to even put yourself on their radar?
First of all, like when we first started, it was a big pain point. Like you didn't have a lot of the apps that you have today. And so we have an apparel brand here in Israel that we work with. And we have a shoe company in Los Angeles, and we have a furniture company in Canada. And so we're spread all over the place, but it's, yeah, it's not like we're not the, just to like to be transparent, we're talking about $2,500 a month subscription. It's something that is worth our time to get out there to do the integration. And because of the stickiness of it, because we have pretty much 100% retention, we're focusing on the clients. And if we're not in the place yet that we have too many clients that we're losing ourselves yet. When we get to those problems, then definitely we're going to need to have more teams and develop more structured
Partners, implementation partners. There's plenty of consultancies out there that work with supply chain consultancies and demand planning consultancies and WMS consultancies, et cetera, where this feels like a bit of an adjunct to a WMS or an OMS or an ERP. It fits in that business system bucket, is what I would say. And so that makes sense. But you also have, it's pretty accessible. I know you said $2,500, but when you got the basic plan at $269 a month, you got standard, you got premium's $879 a month. So it feels you've tried to, through your pricing model, your typical SaaS platform, you got these tiers and then you got the inclusions at each tier. But it feels like you've definitely tried your hardest to democratize access to this type of technology.
Yeah, we're getting there. Right now, we're very much customized. So we go in and we customize everything pretty much for the customer. Because of the way, this is again from the experience, just because in these levels of companies, it's companies that sell $100 million a year. There's just too many things that are unique for each business that we're just seeing that everything is customizable. And we haven't found really the kind of that small app that we can connect and just let people go. We haven't found that yet in this model. And that's something that maybe we can talk about this later. But I think that is the next opportunity for us, finding that $269 a month package that we can give to a small business that they can take and run with it. Right now, the integration and the processes involved with it are complex. And that's something that's something that is probably the biggest blocker for us to get to a lot of the different, but that's the nature of the business.
That's the nature of almost every single piece of business management software is system integration. Almost every single project I'm involved in anyway, the integration can be as costly, as complex, and as time consuming to implement as any other component of the individual component in the stack. And I think a lot of businesses forget that. Now, when we think about the other business systems that your clients are typically running, are they typically running an ERP? Are they typically running a QuickBooks or a Xero, which are just accounting systems? They're definitely not ERPs. Or are they tending, because obviously when you get a business that's doing 20 million bucks a year, most of the ones I work with anyway, they're running an ERP by that stage. They're big enough to warrant an ERP. And especially if you get to the $100 million level, it would be very rare that someone at 100 million bucks a year is going to be running QuickBooks or Xero. It just doesn't happen. And so you start seeing a lot more NetSuite, D365, SAP, Infor. You start seeing a lot more ERPs at that sort of 50 million and above GMV level. That's when we start seeing ERPs. So would you say the vast majority of the merchants that you work with, are they running an ERP, or are they just running an accounting system and they're relying on you to do everything else?
A lot of them are running legacy ERPs, like these really old systems. It's surprising. You wouldn't imagine because they have these dinosaurs that they're working with, and it's hard. And then you have the middle stack are the ones that are not yet ready for the big ERPs that are, and then they want something that they can hone in. So that's where we are coming in and say, okay, don't go through that huge, you're going to need to use $1 million just for doing the integration. Let's do this. We're going to go in, we're going to help you at this really important part of your business. And then when the ERP comes in, people are still used to that communication with the vendors and everything that they hook us up as well, and they keep us on. But we're right there in the middle. So if we're coming in and the company's already has a large ERP connected to it, then it's going to be hard for us to get in the door. But if they have this really old system that they're just grinding their teeth on, then we're able to get in. And if they're small and they're not ready yet for that big ERP, that's where also we get in.
And then I guess some of the complexity also comes in when you have to think about the supplier systems you've got to connect to, right? So we're talking, I don't know, maybe they dump a CSV onto an SFTP server or something like that once a day or once a week, whatever it is. You pick that up, you pull that in, so you understand what the inventory availability looks like, what the expected supply time is on that if they need to make it to order, et cetera, et cetera. So it feels like the supply side is probably just as complex to think about, especially if you've got hundreds or potentially thousands of suppliers. That's when it starts getting really interesting really fast.
Yeah. Suppliers, we divide suppliers into two. There are suppliers that feel that the customer, like my customer, right, the retailer, is big enough that they'll do anything for them, that they will just work and just communicate with them and they love it. But then there are suppliers that they're so big that this is just not something that they care too much about.
It's a hassle.
Yeah, they're just waiting for the order and they're not very communicative. And that's the big channel for us, because we don't really need to hook up to any of their systems. The pricing is there if they want to communicate costs and negotiate costs, that's one thing. And there are some suppliers that we also, and especially overseas suppliers, that we want to know what they're holding in stock.
Yeah.
So,
what do they have that they can ship right now if we place an order?
Exactly. What do they have? So in that situation, we also want to, again, it's all about cash management. So we want to say, okay, we want to do an early order with you. We want to order the stock, but we're not going to pay you now. We're going to pay you when in the next 6 months. We promise that. So all sorts of scenarios like that you want to keep cash flow positive. And so that's where we need that communication and we need those situations with suppliers, but we don't really hook up to their system. They only have visibility into their orders, their shipments. By the way, orders and shipments are two separate things. You can order as many as you want, but just ship whatever you want from the different orders. So you need to suppliers. The overseas suppliers love this. They can go in and say, okay, we have this ready. Do you want to take it out? Those are things that they see that working on that system allows them to keep the customer very in check, and everybody it's very transparent. And so the majority of them love it. The big problem is the big boys that they don't want to communicate, or they're not as open to using another system. Again, comes down to culture and work and how you get your suppliers on board and keep them in check.
But even if you only want an inventory number, that's still an integration. Like you still need to be able to get inventory out of their system. They're not going to log into the supplier portal and update their inventory holdings by SKU manually once a day or once a week. That you still need to integrate with them in some fashion.
Yeah, that's something that we're probably going to get down the road. Right now, we're very focused on getting data of demand planning, forecasting based on what the end customer is going to want and how many that they're going to want. That's really our focus. It's really important to, when you're managing your different suppliers, that you'll keep them transparent to see what are you grading your items, grading your SKUs, making sure it's your top 200. You always have high that don't get below 95% of best of your top 200. Find your donkeys, be able to get a read of your donkeys. So keep So this is something that's always moving and always changing and things like that. And when you have, for instance, like 20 different revenue streams, again, allocations of that, how allocations of, for instance, like you said, different branches and things like that. Yeah, it's complex, and we're trying to make things simple. And
Yeah. It makes sense. Any business system that is super simple to use, super simple to implement, lightweight, low cost. The reality is the simpler the better. The KISS methodology is still a winner. Keep it simple, stupid. I'm a big fan of the KISS methodology. I'm a big fan of micro solutions, microservices, micro apps that do one thing and they do them very well, as opposed to very large, very expensive monolithic systems where maybe you use 10% or 20% of the functionality, but you're paying for 100% of it every single month. This is where big, heavy duty ERPs, that's where they start to not necessarily make sense if you're a smaller business, because you're paying 100% of the money for 10% of that functionality that you can leverage. And you've got to have resources internally to be able to make use of those platforms. It's just that simple. You have to be able to upskill. You have to have admins of these technologies. And you have to have someone that's going to live in these systems to make them the best use of them and get ROI on them. Now, as we come to the end of our time together, what for you guys, what's on your radar? What are your customers asking for today that you don't do? Or if you were to look out 12 to 18 months from now, what are some things that you don't do today that you think we really want to be able to knock this off the list because it's really important to us and we know it's really important to the market?
yeah, our right now, I mean, everybody's talking about generative AI and how to get that into the business. And of course, we can use some API plug in with AI, and it just makes sense to automate a lot of these processes, a lot of the things. And that's like the next phase, I think, for communicator base as well. And Bayes law, like you said at the beginning, we're basing the basic algorithm of communicator base is based on Bayes law, which many call it the first AI. And it's so for us, I think that's where the next step is. And like I said, we're aiming to get to trying to find that sweet spot for smaller retailers under 20 million that we can offer them something that's going to be simple for them to integrate, and it's going to be flexible enough that they can get on board, and it's going to be inexpensive for them and easy, for us to manage.
More of a self-service product, more of a self-service subscription product, that easy self-onboarding, easy self-configuration, get ROI straight away within days or weeks. You started to get some pretty solid ROI on the technology and making it accessible and making it easy to service at scale, versus these kind of bespoke implementations and integrations of today. It's an admirable goal, because I think that the more out of the box integrations a platform can have, the easier it is for brands to onboard that technology, and they'll just simply see higher uptake. There's a reason why Klaviyo, for example, is installed in, I think it's something like 80% or something ridiculous like that of Shopify stores. Same with Gorgeous. Same with these other technologies that are common in the D2C and B2C stack. It's oftentimes, when you look at it, they've done a lot of things right to get to where they are, but the one thing they have universally nailed is out of the box integrations with many technologies, and to where they've built an ecosystem. It takes a village. And the reality is, the bigger ecosystem that you have around your technology with drop-in, out-of-the-box, turnkey solutions, it just stands to reason that the more use cases you can tackle, right? So it makes absolute sense. Now, Amitai, this has been a fantastic conversation. Yeah, it's very admirable. I will always advocate for software vendors, partners, suppliers that are trying to fill a very clear gap in the market, particularly in the mid-market. I think that's where there's at the enterprise end of the market, there's lots of solutions. At the tiniest end of the market, there's lots of solutions. But it's the mid-market where the use cases are more complex than somebody who's a startup and somebody who's doing less than $1 million a year in revenue, but they're not quite as complex and bespoke as the big boys, and they don't have the money, and they don't have the revenue to be able to support highly bespoke custom solutions. And so that fat middle has a very large TAM, but it's also very difficult to execute on that TAM because they have more complex use cases, but not necessarily the money to do the level of custom integration that's required. So it's an eye of the needle that you have to thread, and that's a real challenge. So I applaud anybody who's trying to do that, trying to thread that needle. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, I'll put your link, your two website links. I'll put those in the show notes. I'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But if somebody wants to reach out to you other than going to communicatorbase.com and they
Mhm.
want to talk to you about demand planning, supply chain, logistics, etc., how should people get a hold of you?
First of all, I love geeking out of these things. That's really, yeah, I just love talking about those kinds of things. Yeah, anyone who wants to communicate with me, they can do that through LinkedIn or through my email at amitai@communicatorbase.com. And yeah, really appreciate this conversation. It was super fun. And yeah, thank you so much. Actually learned a lot in talking to
Uh,
you. It seems like you have a trove of knowledge. I didn't expect you to be such a supply chain expert. So that
Well,
was
I don't know that I'm necessarily a supply chain expert. I'm just old, and I've been in this game for a very long time. I've been in the e-commerce game for 24. This is my 24th year, I think, in the e-commerce game. So I've been doing this a really long time. But thank you for the compliment. Now, now I get to flip the script. I get to turn the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Amitai, what is your question for me today?
Tell me about your e-commerce. Where'd you start up? That's always interesting to me. What's your one thing that you're proud about in your e-commerce experience, and also where you start from?
Like many people in this industry, I fell into this industry, literally fell into this industry. At the start of my career, I was living in Christchurch, New Zealand at the time.
Mm.
This was very early days in the e-commerce space. And I met someone who had a friend who owned an agency. They were American living in New Zealand. They had married a Kiwi. The owner of this agency had married a New Zealander, had married a Kiwi woman, and he had a small agency that was a satellite office of the bigger parent company in Australia. And they were not just an e-commerce agency. They were also a hosting company, and they also had, we didn't call it SaaS back then, but they had their own hosted e-commerce platform and CMS. We just called it a hosted platform. We didn't have this concept of SaaS back then. And I knew that e-commerce, I didn't necessarily know e-commerce, but I knew this internet thing was going to completely change the entire face of society in every possible way, from commerce to communication to dating to just, I could tell, I could see the writing on the wall because I had been into this. I was one of the first people in the world, I think, to have an email address, at least amongst my friends. I was on ICQ, I was on bulletin boards. I was into this whole internet thing from very early on. And my dad was into high tech. He actually had a computer store selling business computers very early on when Eagle Computer was a thing. IBM computers became the thing. And so I was exposed to this from quite a young age. And I met this guy through this mutual friend, and he was looking for somebody to help with business development, for helping with digital marketing for his customers to help grow the business. And so I came on board, and I came on initially as a business development manager for the company. And then latterly, I was actually delivering marketing services for clients as well. I was literally doing link building. I was doing outreach. We were doing performance marketing. I was running ad accounts. I was doing all those
Wow.
things. And then I decided, along with a business partner of mine, I thought, geez, why am I doing this for other people? Why don't I start my own e-commerce business? And so a friend of mine and I, we started an e-commerce business. We ran it as a side hustle for the first 6 months. I continued working, and then it grew so fast that one of us needed to quit our job to run this business full time. So I quit my job because my business partner was making about 3 times the salary that I was making. So it was like, I'll quit first. And then another 6 months later, business kind of doubled again, and he quit his job. And then we ran that business for about 7 years, and then eventually sold that. And then I went into working with agencies and brands and everything else after that. So I literally fell into the industry. It was not a plan, but I always knew that this was transformative technology. And I knew that I would probably be involved with it somehow, some way at some point. And it was just, that was the vector that I got into the industry. It was a happy coincidence.
Yeah. What's the name of the company?
It was called Diggy Internet. They no longer exist, but it was called Diggy Internet Hosting and e-commerce. And that at that time, we were building websites on our bespoke technology. But then, not too long after I started with the company, OS Commerce became
Oh,
the thing. So
yeah.
we started building websites on OS Commerce. And then when after I sold my business and went back into agency land, Magento by that stage had taken over almost everything.
Yeah.
I went to work at an agency that was a Magento Gold partner agency, and we were building out complex solutions on Magento, custom solutions. And then laterally in that agency, we took on BigCommerce, and I got my first taste of SaaS, proper SaaS e-commerce. And man, I haven't looked back. Almost all of the technologies that I work with are SaaS. So it's been a fun ride, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Amazing. Well, amazing. It's great to talk to fellow e-commerce
geek. I'll put up my hand and say I'm an e-commerce geek. I'll happily take that one on. Listen, Amitai, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I can't wait to do it again soon. And I wish you every success with CommunicatorBase. I think it's a cool piece of technology, and I hope it goes really well for you. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.